Witches, it's Lee, and this is Do the Magical Thing, and we have got a very special guest this week, author, podcaster, and witchy extraordinaire, Bree NicGarran. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, I'm really stoked to be here. It's lovely to see you in person, sort of.
Yeah, yeah, the sort of magic mirror kind of thing going on, which is cool. So obviously big fan of your books, especially Grovedaughter Witchery. I just completely dig that. And really what I loved from the first off on the page, you were like, witch is a gender neutral term, it can apply to anybody who practices witchcraft, and just that felt really kind of assuring as someone who's stepping into the craft, maybe encounters a load of different stuff there that isn't necessarily as approachable as that was, and as sort of welcoming as that was. So that was really lovely just to sort of see that like from the off. And what I thought was really cool was that when I was sort of scanning down the page and you were saying about witchcraft being something that is very much around sort of personal responsibility and empowerment, and I just wondered sort of why you chose those words and why they're important for witches to have.
Okay, well, first of all, I have to say thank you for featuring my book in your video about your favorites. It did my heart a world of good just to see, there's my book, baby, and it is creased and bookmarked and dog-eared to hell and back. I was like, that is a well-loved book. That is good stuff.
I felt kind of like embarrassed. I was like, do I show this book?
No, it's a really good thing, because it means, like exactly what you said, that you go back and you read it over and over again. If you see someone and they've got a book that they're like, oh, I love this book, but the book is still in like pristine condition, it's like, how many times have you read it? Are you sure? Do you maybe have a digital copy? Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love to see a well-loved book.
Oh, so. I'm so pleased. Yeah, I'm so pleased. It is still covered in stuff.
I know.
So yeah.
It looks so cool.
Oh, please. Yeah, it's been a lot of places with me, I'm not going to lie. Very much from the start of my practice, it's been there, and it just feels like that sort of, definitely that companion to my craft over the years. And I've done some great sort of spells from, the correspondence section and all that kind of thing. So and just the inspiration in there and the kind of upfrontness is just, it is epic. So, yeah.
You are so kind. Thank you.
Oh, no.
I'm glad you're finding it useful.
Yeah, honestly, it's epic. And I think, it's fair to say that most of the witches I know, especially in the kind of atheist and sort of non-theist secular kind of place, it's the go-to book. Do you know what I mean? I don't think there's ever a book that's recommended over this one.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that I think is just, it's super solid. I think for me, it's always my first choice for witches. People who ask, you always get those questions like book recommendations and things. And it's, it's always my number one. So thank you for writing it.
Well, it was kind of an accident. We can get to that later, but to actually answer your question,
yes.
Well, it was very important to me writing it, especially because the title was Grovedaughter Witchery. I didn't want to have anyone pick this up and go into it and be like, oh, is this just for, people who present as female or are assigned female at birth? I wanted to make it very plain that this is for everyone.
Cool.
And if you are holding this book in your hands, if you're reading it, and if it resonates, then it is for you, no matter who you are, no matter what your background is or what path you're following. If you find it useful, then it's for you. And the personal responsibility thing was kind of part of my own journey. A big part of becoming a witch for me, besides the self-discovery and the gaining in confidence and just the personal sense of empowerment, was learning along the way that, oh, hey, if I'm going to, empower myself, I must also be responsible for what I do. So accountability is a big part of that. It's taking on not only, oh, I have, the ability to do things, I have the ability to influence things and make things happen to a certain degree. It's also, I am responsible for what I do. No one else, just me.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that doesn't get touched on enough.
Mm.
There's a lot of books that will talk about, you know, how amazing it is to use magic and how awesome it is to be a witch and how you feel powerful and self-actualized and more confident, which is all wonderful. And you know, people need that. But it's also, you need to remind people that, hey, that also means that you're responsible for what you do.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so true. I think, yeah, it can be easy to sort of get carried away and then not think about the bigger picture sometimes. Totally, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. And I think it's also the thing with a lot of how can I say this without generalizing too much? Um, Perhaps the newer or maybe the younger members of the community
Sure.
who uh, they're still finding their feet, and maybe they haven't run into a wide variety of resources yet. Maybe they're still kind of pulling from, shall we say, some older sources, which
Yeah.
have a very different attitude from what we actually do now. And so, you know, they're just kind of like, oh, you know, they're very focused on, you know, what can I do? What can I affect? You know, who can I, you know, stuff in a jar today or whatever. And it's like, no, you do still have to think about other people. You have to operate within the community. You
Yeah.
are not an island,
Mm.
you know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I totally dig that. What do you think the place is of those sort of older texts with perhaps ethics or concepts that aren't really what we'd probably go for from the off to date? Do you think, because I see a lot of folks recommending books that I kind of cringe at sometimes, and that I kind of understand their place in the witchy history of things, but I
Mhm.
question sort of why they're recommended as much as they are, when perhaps you have to end up unlearning things that you learn from them. What do you think on that?
Oof. Yeah, unlearning is a big thing. And uh it's a part of every witch's journey where you have to unlearn things that you initially thought were true at the start. You have to update your beliefs, you have to update your information, and you can't just, you know, be like, okay, well, this is what I believed from the start and this is what I'm going to believe from now on, and I'm not going to change anything, and I'm not going to assimilate new information. And you have to assimilate new information. You have to keep learning. You should always be learning,
Yeah.
because the minute that you don't think you have to learn anymore, bad stuff happens.
Hmm.
You become overconfident, and you, when you talk to people, you kind of start to sound like a douche.
That's
Yeah,
completely fair.
there's always something new to learn because the world and the community are always changing, and
Hmm.
we have to keep up with that. So these older texts do have a place, like you said, as historical reference, just seeing, you know, we need to know where we came from in order to understand where we are. And some of them as well have a place as sort of a foundational text, if you will. It's like, oh, okay, when this was still all coming together, when modern witchcraft was still all coming together, and people had their groups, Gardner, Buckland, and so on, Doreen Valenti, when they were sort of putting their movement together that then influenced everything else, uh, they thought of things a certain way. And we need to know what they thought in order to understand why we do things this way now.
Yeah, I dig that. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think it's nice to have that perspective, but to sort of, yeah, just bring it into sort of where we are now, rather than sort of, I think, holding on to things that perhaps aren't as helpful as they perhaps were at some point.
Yeah, and there is a lot in the older sources. I've actually been I've been curating a small collection online on a Dropbox folder that's a whole lot of classical texts on magic. And it's stuff that you see referenced everywhere: the Gardnerian Book of Shadows, Leland's Aradia, Elphus Levi's History of Magic, Fraser's Golden Bough. And, you know, these things were instrumental to creating the view of magic as we see it today. There's a lot of it that is also incredibly racist, incredibly sexist, and just really not appropriate for, you know, it is outdated thinking that we now know is, you know, not acceptable, but we have to look at it and go, oh, okay, this is how they were thinking, and these were the mechanics they were laying down, but maybe let's discard the commentary on other things and replace it with our modern understanding of, hey, you have to treat people decently. It's
Yeah.
not, but like I said, it's important to have the historical viewpoint.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you say Grovedaughter Witchery came about by accident, did it?
Yeah. Yeah. I do like to call it my accidental book. uh the year that I got married, 2016, I actually lost my job 2 weeks before the wedding.
Oh my goodness.
It was a career position, and they had decided that they didn't want to have satellite offices anymore. And I was a satellite office. I was working from home in Virginia, and the offices were up in Pennsylvania, where I used to live. So 2 weeks before the wedding, they were like, well, you can either move back up here. Were they going to cover the expenses? No, they weren't. And you can start coming back into the office again, or we'll have to terminate your contract. And I'm like, I'm getting married in 2 weeks. You know, I can't do that. I'm not salty much these days. Well, it led to good things, so it's okay, but sometimes I just still kind of go,
yeah, you have those moments, don't you? Just like, I learned something from that, but also
oh, best believe they went in a jar.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I got married October of that year, and you know, November, obviously National Novel Writing Month came just after, and I was like, you know what, I'm on unemployment, I got nothing to do, my husband's working nights, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to finally write that novel that I've been promising myself I was going to write since I was 12.
Yeah.
So I get into it, I have all these ideas, and just nothing was coming together. It wasn't working. I couldn't get things to flow the way I wanted to. I didn't have any ideas, and it was very frustrating. So about halfway through the month, I'm like, all right, let me take a break. Let me go back into my files. I'll just sit on Tumblr and answer questions for a while, because that makes writing easier. And sometimes if I can write something else that's easy, that'll kind of unblock everything else creatively. So I go back in my files and I'm like, there's an awful lot of articles here, just questions I've answered, things I've written down just to quantify stuff to myself. And I was kind of like, you know, I wonder if I put this all in a Word document, how many pages would it be? 95. Okay, so we're doing this.
Yeah.
So that became my new project, and I worked on it. Writing became my full-time job for about 2 months, and then the editing process. Oh, sorry, I can't do it without cringing. It's painful. It hurts. Oh, good Lord. The headaches, the amount of coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Unholy. But January of the following year, I had a book.
Nice.
And it was my first solo book. I had collaborated with someone a few years before to do the first version of the Sisters Grimoire. But Grovedaughter Witchery was all mine. And it was the first book that I could put out there and kind of point to and go, yeah, that was all me.
Yeah,
and I was very, very proud of it. I still am. It's still my little book, baby, and I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it should be. I think what amazes me about it is how you manage to write. You kind of, it's as if you sort of addressed all the questions you could possibly have in the first sort of few pages, and you're like, oh, tick, 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 tick. Like, I was going to ask this, but actually you've said it already. And okay, it's all there. Like, all right, I'll get on with the magic now. Like, okay, cool. So, so yeah, I really dug that. And Yeah, I really like when you said about sort of ways of honing in on your craft, how you use kind of 3 words, which was explore, learn and practice. And you're saying about sort of how your craft changes over the years and things, and over time. What did you sort of start out exploring, and have you brought anything that you explored then into the now, or has things changed? What would you say?
Yes, and definitely. Um, when I set out to write the book initially, it was like I wanted to answer all of the questions that I had when I was first starting out, and be like, okay, here I am years down the road, and these are all the things that I wish someone had told me when I was starting. So that's why there was just like a checklist in my head of like, what was all the stuff I wish I knew, and there it was. hmm But when I started, I was coming in from a lens of really, really loving folklore and fairy tales, and basically any story with a witch in it or magic in it. I was hooked. And my sort of gateway drug, if you will, was studying herbal medicine.
Oh,
I was studying how to grow and use herbs medicinally, when someone handed me a copy of Cunningham's, and I haven't looked back. Um, and I have brought that into my practice pretty strongly. I think most of my practice is plant based. 99% of the time, if I'm looking to make a spell, if I'm looking to put something together, the first thing I go for is that shelf full of herbs. And that's why Grovedaughter Witchery, I think, is so focused on plants, herbs, spices, trees, you know, anything that you can get in that context. You'll see, going through it, there's plenty of spells that are based on other things that have other components, and just go, yeah, you can use herbs if you want to. And then there's some that are, here are the herbs you use.
yeah.
And that's kind of how my practice is. And it is that way to this day. It's very plant focused. I have my little garden in the living room, and way, way, way too many jars full of dried plant material. But it's useful stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lovely little shop nearby called Clancy's, which is just so great. There's this little guy with his little kind of hut in a market store, and he's just got so many amazing herbs and spices and everything, and it's just they just smell so great, and I love just that
Yes.
sort of excitement of like getting something. I'm growing some herbs. They're very sort of small at the moment, so even I'm just like, oh yeah, they're kind of my herb babies at the moment. I've got a windowsill, and so that's where they're sitting, and I'm sort of like just like inching them along, just like, come on, you can do it. Yeah, I just love the sort of the concept of growing things, and having that almost that kind of journey with the herb before you even use it in anything. How would you say you work with herbs? Because we often, I find, seeing in books and things like that, they say about working with plant allies or building that kind of connection. How would you go about doing that with a herb?
Well, it really depends on if it's something that I can grow myself, or if it's something that I have to get from a botanical supplier or a shop somewhere. Um, Usually, when I'm working with herbs, it's just, this is dried material that's coming out of a pot. It is a component, and I am, I see it as, okay, you have these properties, but other than that, you're kind of a blank slate. Now, if it is something that I have foraged or that I have grown myself, then it's a little bit different, because it's, okay, I have given something to you before taking this piece. Whether it's, okay, you're a plant out in the wild, and I've, poured some water on your roots before taking, a small cutting, or you're a plant that I've grown from a seed, and I've, given you my energy, and I've watered you and sung to you, and therefore I will use these cuttings, as I need to. That's very, very different. Um, Working with land spirits is something I don't do terribly often. I did it much more when I lived in Pennsylvania, because I was much more familiar with you know, the area and stuff that was going on, and I didn't have weird neighbors. Yeah, it's much easier when you can just go out to the maple tree in your mom's backyard and sit there and read a book and like no one bugs you.
Yeah.
You know, here it's like, yeah, I could go out and, you know, sit under that myrtle tree and, you know, read a book and commune and all of that. But I also know that there will be lousy, noisy children running around who don't like to leave people alone.
No.
Or there will be people walking their dogs, so I never know if what I'm sitting on is clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Or I can go to my in-laws' farm for a measure of peace if I want to do that. But that's still, it's like it's someone else's land. You know, it's not really mine.
Yeah.
It's friendly. It's very nice there. But it's also very hot here. And I don't really like being sweaty.
Yeah.
I know that's like anathema. It's like, wait, you're a green witch who loves plants, but you don't like being outside in the summer? No.
I think there are many of like witches like that actually, and it's that kind of thing of like, I love nature, but also it gets hot.
Hate camping. Yes. I love nature when it's out there, and I'm in here where it's comfy.
Yeah, no, it's funny you said it, because I've got outside of the flat, the window where my little herbs are, there's a street tree, and I put little bird seed around it to feed the local rooks and things, and that's been lovely, and they're sort of getting used to me-ish now, and just peering out the window at them being like, say hello, and it's like, that kind of trying to build that connection with the local you know, animals and things like that. But yeah, dogs pee and poo at that place far too often for me to want to sit next to it, plus cars. So yeah.
Yes. Cars. Oh god, yes. Just people going by in cars all day long, people walking back and forth, you know, and for some reason people still need to stand outside and like communicate by shouting. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have a reason for it. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it's not conducive to me being able to, you know, have a quiet space. So we live in a neighborhood where people are outside and very active a lot. So it's like, well, okay, I'll just sit inside with my garden and do it that way. I don't want to, you know, I shouldn't expect the world to conform to my expectations. I'll just manage them.
Yeah, I think that's so true. There's a park just nearby, which is very lucky in the city that we live in. It's got a few green spaces, and that's really cool. And there's a tree there that I call the solstice tree, because I make little offerings at the solstice, and the sun sort of rises through the branches. It's a big old Scots pine, and it's just like, oh, it's lovely. It's just, you know, the look of them is just something else, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
So I love a good Scotch pine.
Honestly, it's just like, oh, stunning. But it's on the corner of the footpath, because it's a public park. There's like a few of them in this little grove, if you like. So I go there, I touch the tree. Sometimes I put the, you know, bird seed there as well. And but yeah, there's it's never a private ritual. It's never you're just like, yes, I'm a weirdo leaving seed at a tree, like I'm just gonna carry on doing this as your children stare at me, like that's kind of
that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, I love that, and I love it. Just the herb side of thing is really cool, and your correspondences section in the book Grovedaughter Witchery is just is so comprehensive, and so I thought really helpfully laid out, and it's snappy. You can get to it and just be like, right, this is what I need, and kind of pluck bits here and there. How did you go about you know, putting that together? There's so much information in there. How did you build that up and manage to put it into you know, less than, you know, 1 million pages?
Well, anyone who has read you know, Cunningham's beautiful green book will probably recognize the structure of the list, and that is what I based it on. It was like, oh, okay, you know, this was real easy reference for me when I was coming up, so why don't I just use that same structure, and I will use the research that I've done over the years and just go, okay, these are the categories that I know, and these are the herbs that go under these categories, and I'll just list them out. Someone actually contacted me years and years ago going, hey, why didn't you include an appendix where you listed all the herbs by name and their, their properties? I'm like, because somebody else already wrote that book. His name was Mr. Cunningham, and he was very, very helpful. Good dude. Yeah, but I curated my information from a whole lot of different sources just over the years. I'm sure that I forgot to list some of them in the bibliography. I know I did, but you lose track of them over the years. It's, oh, I found this in this obscure little article, or I read this on this website, 20 years ago. But all of that grew into, don't laugh, a spreadsheet.
Oh,
actually, go ahead, laugh. It's funny.
No, you know what? My wife would be like very excited. The word spreadsheet is it's one of her favorite words.
Mine too. I love a good spreadsheet. I have a need in my soul to see things organized, to see information neatly charted and put together and easy to reference. That is what makes me happy. Nice. I wanted to be a librarian when I was younger, and I almost was, but I ran out of money for school. Go figure. So I wrote books instead. But yes, I have. Yeah, I have my my herbs in like just a big 2 or 3 column spreadsheet where it's like, okay, you can sort it either by the name of the herb, or you can sort it by the magical purpose. And it makes it real easy for me to look things up when I need them. And I've kept records of other things that way.
Nice.
So yeah, magical spreadsheets.
I like that. Yeah, I do. That's cool. Yeah, very organized. I'm at the stage of having to collate lots of bits of paper and things that it's not. I feel like you'd be here and be like, oh my God, Lee, what is this? It's just like endless
you might be surprised. I have my share of many books and bits and bobs and random pieces of paper. I've managed to put most of them into binders or notebooks of some kind, but I have found, sort of as time has gone on, that digital grimoires have a lot of promise, and I think they're kind of the wave of the future. And I suspect that we will see a lot more of them as time goes on. I've started one on one of my online cloud drives, and it makes things a lot easier. Rather than trying to download everything or print things out, I can just go save PDF, put it in this folder.
Nice. Yeah.
Yep. And then there's not the worry of having to rearrange things or be like, oh darn, I wrote this page about moon magic and then I followed it up with something about runes, but now I have more to add to the moon magic, but there's not enough room. Put another page in.
Yeah.
Add something to the binder or add another article to the folder. It's much easier for me.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Do you ever think, do you get to a point of in your craft, do you feel like you've got to a point where you're like, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing now? And what do you think are the markers of that?
As far as like reference points or spell casting, or
like just because I feel sometimes people, and I know when I first started out, like, I mean, admittedly, I still I don't know if it's like an onward progression all the time, I think, for me, but I think there was definitely a point where I was like, oh, actually I kind of know what to put in this spell, or I kind of think, oh yeah, I kind of know what to do at this season or something like that. Do you feel there's a point where you're like, hey, actually cool, I can do this now? Like,
yeah, I think there is, and it's going to be different for every witch, because it's not something that you can sort of put a hard date on, really. You can't say, oh, okay, by 1 year in or 2 years in or 5 years in, now I can say. nah, I know what I'm doing. You just sort of feel it. You do exactly what you said. It's like, oh, okay, I'm putting together a luck spell. Okay, I think I need this, 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 and this. Or you can just be like, well, I want to do this spell, and then you intuit what feels right to put into it. Or you say, oh, it's this season of the year. Hey, I know what rituals I want to do, and uh, what festivals happen around now. I think it's really just a matter of confidence. It's when you have the confidence that you don't need someone else to tell you what the right thing is to do. And to a certain point, when you can just pull things out of your head, um, I don't put much stock in memorization because I can't do it. I'm like, no, books and lists exist for a reason. I cannot memorize a grocery list, let alone the correspondences of 50 different plants. My brain is a sieve, which is why I write everything down and let the paper remember so I don't have to. But, once you at least have some idea of what you're doing, and you can either intuit what you need to do, or where to look to find what you need, then I think it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you are becoming at least proficient. I think there's a lot of practitioners who want to call themselves, novices or baby witches or beginners for a very long time, because they're worried about someone else's standard of proficiency rather than feeling where they are on their own and relying on their own confidence and experience. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to want that validation, but I think that a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, I think that some people rely on it for longer than they really need to. And it's just kind of like, no, it's okay. Once you get to a certain point, you don't have to have your spells peer reviewed. You can just go and do stuff, and it's okay. You can still ask questions, always ask questions. Always, always, always ask questions. You never find out anything unless you ask. And there's no such thing as a dumb question, even if you have to ask it a dozen times with a dozen different people, because you might get a dozen different answers. You never know. But at some point, I think it is important to be like, no, I've at least got this. My craft may be this, but I've got this. So I'm good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it was definitely I feel witchcraft kind of goes, it's almost like a cone, if you like, that goes outwards and then goes inwards again, and you keep doing that over time. And I think maybe we just line up all the cones, and so you've got you get kind of somewhere down the path, and you're like, hey, I know this bit, like this little section here, I kind of dig that. And I think what's been so good about communicating with other witches in online spaces and in person is having that kind of broadening and narrowing happen, and getting other people's sort of journeys there and their kind of concepts of how they've gone about things. And just as little tweaks, like you say, about asking questions. I think that's one of the best things, because it's just when you're not talking, you're learning. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the cool thing, is that I think when you start to think, I know it all, not necessarily I know this thing. And I think that's the thing, maybe people don't want to say I know this because they think it means I know it all. It can just mean, like you said, I know this thing and I want to know more. And I think learning is one of the it's definitely one of my favorite parts of of the craft, and it's something that I think keeps things fresh and keeps you going in terms of your practice. And I think it's definitely something that I value in terms of over the years, of practicing and thinking and reflecting back on stuff you perhaps explored, and then kind of got to the end of that, what you need from that, I think. And then I think you definitely sort of broaden and narrow for me.
Yep. It's interesting that you refer to it as a path, because I know a lot of us do, but the way I see it is, yes, it's a path, but it's kind of a garden path for me. You sort of start out and you have this big sort of expansive garden that you are learning to explore and tend in a way, and that is the garden of your own knowledge and experience. And for a while, you know, the paths are going to be very overgrown. You might get lost occasionally. You might know where some things are, but you're still going to be going, shoot, where did I leave that thing? Which way do I go to? Oh, yeah. But over time, you know, there will be things that become more familiar, things that will be easier to navigate, you know, things that you have cultivated and worked with enough that they become familiar, and then those things become easy. And there will be other bits that are going to require a bit more work or a bit more time, and things that are, you know, maybe a little bit harder to get to where you want them to be. And that space is not finite, it is ever expanding, and it is as big or as small as you need it to be, depending on where you are.
I really dig that analogy as the sort of, yeah, the whole kind of garden thing's really cool actually, because there's always work to do, and there are seasons and there are ways of sort of, you know, getting stuck into stuff, and like you say about the expanding outwards, I think that's a really helpful thing to have in mind. I'm quite a visual sort of person, so picturing myself in the sort of center of this garden and going, right, this is my sort of 360, where shall I start or where shall I continue? And then imagining that kind of radiating outward over the years and over sort of time is really, that's a really great way of thinking. And actually I think that works so much better than a sort of linear thing, because life isn't really very linear. It's kind of very much like, I really, that's a really cool concept. I also loved earlier when you were talking about sort of the page can be the memory. It kind of makes me feel like pages are sort of little memory spells or something now. I've got that thing of like, hey, that's a memory spell. The page, happy days. Yeah, I really dig that. I love that. Yeah, I love that sense of sort of tending and growing. And what do you think? Because you said about sort of time scale from obviously from things from years ago to now. What have been the sort of main changes you've noticed in witchcraft as a whole from when you started out to now?
Oh boy. Well, it's become a lot more inclusive, first and foremost. The community used to be, when I started, and I should say this might be because, you know, I started out as a witch almost 20 years ago now, early 2000s. So then, you know, things were still very focused on Wicca, which is fine. There just weren't very many resources out there that weren't focused on Wiccan ideas or Wiccan rhetoric or Wiccan dogma. So this idea now that we have much bigger spaces for witches of various other traditions, and, you know, secular witches and atheist and agnostic witches, and there's a lot more variety in the things that people are able to do. They're not tied to, okay, well, if you want to be a witch, you basically have like this tiny handful of possibilities of traditions you can follow, or you can make your own path. But that's sort of, you know, eclectic witch used to be kind of a dirty word. They'd be like, oh, you're eclectic. Oh, it just means that you haven't figured out what you're doing yet. Or that, worse, the implication among some might be that you didn't know what you were doing at all, especially if you were solitary. And so many of us are these days, just because, you know, the online community has become sort of this semi-global coven that we are all tangentially part of, because, you know, we relate to each other over the internet, and we use that to communicate and share information and participate in, you know, rituals or festivals or you know, calls or what have you. So the element of inclusion it's much nicer, and it's also very good that we've seen things open up to have this idea of, yeah, no, you don't have to be a particular gender, race, religion, background, nationality, sexuality, whatever. There is no one definition of this type of person can be a witch, but that's it. It's no, anybody can be a witch. All they have to do is be comfortable self-identifying as a witch and practicing some form of witchcraft, whatever that happens to mean to them. And that's it. That's really it. And that's why I wanted to make such a point of mentioning that in my book, because so many of the sources that I learned from initially, and some later on that I kind of had to sort of comb through and cherry pick what was important and useful and what was just kind of like, let's agree to disagree. It was like, no, I feel like this is something that is said on the internet all the time, and people need to see this in print. Even if I'm just, one independent author and this is never going to be in Barnes and Noble, this needs to be in print somewhere, because the line needs to be drawn and it needs to be said. So that was real important to me. But yeah, inclusiveness is the biggest change that I've seen, and sort of the broadening of the horizon, with more paths being included in the conversation, and also the advent of technology as this, equally valid and important way that we communicate and learn and keep our records. We talk about witchy social media all the time, and I know we all kind of joke about witch blur and witch talk and all of that, but the fact remains that that is still bringing people to the craft. And there is something I like to remind people of. It doesn't matter how you got here. What matters is that you're here.
Yeah.
So sure, maybe some people are coming in with, hey, this looked neat and the aesthetic was cool, and I saw this on Instagram and now I'm here. But it's like, hey, you're here.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah, I really dig that. I think there's so much, I think, yeah, though, it's definitely because in the 90s when I had a friend who was Wiccan and, looked at some of the books they had, it was, yeah, there wasn't Grovedaughter Witchery then. There wasn't that sort of, that primer. And it put me, like, I didn't end up getting into the craft until, much later, because I thought, oh, I have to believe that or do that to be a witch, and that's not what I want or what I'm seeking. And I think, yeah, you're so right on the whole thing when it comes to sort of social media, because I'm in a sort of quite close-knit online Facebook group that's basically a coven, essentially. And I've been in that for, 5 years now. And it's a place where so much happens that is both magically and mundanely potent. And how can that not be a valid magical space? And I think there's so much disparaging kind of stuff that we have about social media. And I think it's more about consumption than the actual, than the tool that it is. And I think that's what I sort of use it as personally, as a tool. And just the sheer amount of information that we can share with each other, that's one of my big things, that I, with information, I feel like it should be as accessible as possible. And so for me, the fact that it exists and witches can communicate together and communicate in their own little ways is just super ace. I love that. And I love the opportunity to talk to you is just through social media. That's an epic thing. So like, yeah, I totally dig that. Having seen those changes from when you first started out to now, perhaps a kind of thought-provoking question: is there anything you would banish from witchcraft? Any one particular thing or a set of things? What do you think?
Well, it's got to be said, get the white supremacists out. Just get them all out. No Nazis in witchcraft.
Yeah.
No, freaking out. Go. That is something that makes me madder than just about anything else, is seeing people who are appropriating rhetoric and appropriating symbols and appropriating pagan spaces to try and spread just this disgusting, hateful message, and it makes me sick. It's like, no, because there are other parts of this community especially in the Norse sector. And now it's bleeding over into the Celtic sector. And I'm like, oh no, you didn't. It's like, no, there are good people here who are just trying to, worship their gods and practice their craft and live their damn lives. But because these people, want to, faff about and be awful and use this as an excuse or a smokescreen for their hate craft, it's making things more difficult for everyone else. So it annoys me very, very much. It makes me very mad that every time I meet someone who says, hey, I am a Norse pagan, that I have to go, are you a Norse pagan or are you a Norse pagan?
Yeah.
I hate that I have to do that. I hate that I have to doubt people. I hate that I have to second guess people from my own community. It's bad enough that we have to worry about, other exclusionary practices. It's bad enough that we have to worry about the people who have sort of predatory or cult leader sort of mentalities. Thankfully, it's not as prevalent as it used to be, but you still find them in every community. And it's bad enough that we have to worry about, fundamentalists who try and tell everybody else what to do. But the fact that we have to worry about, oh, okay, am I talking to somebody who's like, a like-minded, cool, fun, pagan person, or am I talking to somebody that literally any other day I would punch in the face? Let me think about this. And the fact that, being a witch and being a pagan has become more socially acceptable and much more visible, that's a great thing. But unfortunately, people are turning it to their advantage in some less than good ways. So, that if I could, just like stuff something into a jar and fling it into the sun, it would be that. It'd be like, no, get your racism out of my community, scram.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's such a toughie because one of the tools of divination I use the most really is runes. And I learned about them when I was in my teens, and I can write notes in Elder Futhark and all that stuff. And it's something that's been with me for so many years and something that I've found very useful. But it's that fearfulness of especially because I do on Instagram Runes Day Wednesday, and each time I think, is someone going to misinterpret this? As much as there's nothing about, the runes themselves are just a tool, people usurping that. And especially the last rune is that I'm covering is Othala, and obviously that's been co-opted so much. And whilst I want to put information out there that I've researched, and I'm coming from a queer, inclusive perspective, as much as I'm trying to do that, there is that sort of that hesitation. And I kind of paused it for a while because I was like, after the sort of events that happened in the capital, I was like, do I really want to be putting this, do I want runes to be something that's associated with me? And then I was like, but this is not something that should be, given up to that sort of supremacist thing. And there needs to be, like you said about having that, there needs to be this imprint about, this space and this practice, and that line to be drawn. I think the more that you can go, actually, this is what it's about, and not, this misinterpretation, this willful kind of, this sort of bastardization of it. I think, there's a space for that, but it can be so, it can be really disheartening, because when you like you say, these are beliefs that are really something that are held quite dear by people in terms of their practice, and then seeing those symbols, seeing figures from those practices being used in that way is just, it is incredibly really frustrating.
I mean, as much as I say, I'm a secular witch because I don't involve my deities in my day-to-day craft, I do have 4 patron deities. 2 of them are Norse. So whenever I see you know, Mjolnir on some racist, it's like,
Yeah.
it's a fight on sight.
Yeah.
It makes me mad. It's like, no, you do not know what you're talking about. You are using this as an excuse. You are just picking out the bits that agree with whatever gross fantasy version of the world you want to see. It's like, no, this is not what is at the heart of these stories. You have no clue what you're talking about. And oh, mm, it touches like a lot of nerves, and none of them are happy.
Yeah, all the nerves. Yeah.
Oh, freaking, oh, and just, you know, now they're moving into, like I said, they're trying to move into Celtic spaces and appropriate, you know, those stories and those symbols. And I'm like, listen, bub,
Yeah.
you will pry this reed cross from my cold, dead hands. Not gonna happen. So, and like you said, it's super important to educate people about, hey, no, this is not meant to be used for racism. This is not meant to be used as a tool of oppression. This is associated with, you know, these particular things. This is the history of it. This is the story of it. This is where it comes from. And, you know, the fact that these jerkwads are using it for whatever does not change the fact that there are plenty of people out there who are very decent people who know what they're talking about, who are using it for non-icky reasons. And we have to keep using these symbols the way they were meant to be used, and we have to keep educating people about their actual meaning, because the second that we stop, it means we've lost them.
I think that. Perhaps on sort of more happy nerves.
Yeah. Getting fired
I
up.
really, to be fair, that was like, yes, power to the people. I really, yeah. It's so.
Where's my pickle jar? Where's my pickle jar?
Mate, pickles are just the superpower of of any kind of spell ingredient. I love pickles so much. So in terms of sort of more kind of the constructive side of the craft, and the constructive side of rather than perhaps banishing the attracting side of things, what has been your most magical experience, or whether it's something that you've cast, whether it's something like a ritual you attended, or just something that you know, anything? What do you feel has been a moment where you're like, wow, this is it?
Well, there are two that come to mind, and I'm smiling because they're both very life-changing in a lot of ways. And I'm not even saying that as, you know, a pleasant hyperbole. It's like, literally, these were moments that changed the course of my life. One was pretty mundane. I was driving down the road next to the Delaware River. It was a lovely day. I think it was late spring, because it was warm, but it wasn't like blazing hot yet. And I had the windows open, and I had music playing, and, you know, just the hand out the window and the wind in the hair. And there was this moment, and nothing in particular like touched it off. I was just, you know, chanting along with music, and suddenly everything felt right. It was like, you know, it felt like I had been sleeping and I opened my eyes, or, you know, a switch was thrown somewhere and suddenly, you know, the lights came on, and I felt connected to everything that was happening in that moment. You know, the movement of the car, and the movement of the river, and the wind, and the sunlight, and the trees that were going by. It was like, I feel everything that I can see right now. And, you know, I couldn't even stop to like process it. I just had to kind of roll with it. And it went on for a good minute or so while the music was going. And, you know, then the song ended, and I kind of went like, whew. And that's one of the bits that I sort of think back on, in my journey as a witch, just sort of, that was a moment when I realized, oh, okay, I'm not just going through the motions here. I'm not just talking a good game.
Mm.
When I am in the moment, when I am, doing the thing, when I am doing the magical thing, there is something to that. There is a flow, there is energy, and I can feel it.
Mm.
It wasn't just, oh, I'm doing this because it sounds right, or, this is what I'm supposed to do and it looks right. It's like, no, this feels right. And that changed everything. I was much more confident after that. And it was just that moment of, aha, now I get it. And I dove into my research after that and was like, okay, ask the universe for a sign. That seems like a sign to me. Like, yeah, you're on the right path, kiddo. You have found the thing that you are supposed to be doing. Now do it. Yeah. And the other one, have you seen Practical Magic?
Yes. It's one of my faves.
Same. Formative stuff. Other people had the craft. I had Practical Magic. Well, there's the love spell that Sally casts in that Amos Veritas. So some years ago, I had gotten out of a relationship. Things ended well, but it was just kind of like, man, I really wanted that to work out and it just didn't. And I was tired of, looking around and having things not work out and just being lonely. And it was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. What's the point of being a witch if you can't use witchcraft to get what you want?
Yeah.
So, and I actually just found the Tumblr post that I made about this the other day. There are pictures on my Tumblr of the actual little setup that I had. I put together a love spell. It is the only one I've ever cast. But it was, find me someone who's right for me. I'm not going to bother, settling anymore. I'm going to write down a list of everything I want. I mean, if you're going to use magic, you may as well get everything you want. And I did my ritual for 7 straight nights. I went hard. So that was November of that year. And I'm like, all right, there you go. I've done the thing. Let's see what happens. January, the following year, I attended a party, and this fella who had been my friend and my battle buddy for quite some time comes up to the table where I'm reading tarot for tips, and he puts a $5 in my jar and says he wants a reading. I'm like, all right, a couple of mundane things, a couple of job related things, and okay, that's odd. There was a lady in his life that he had been unsure about for quite some time. Somebody that he wanted something more with, but wasn't sure how to ask, and was worried about ruining an existing relationship or how she thought of him. It's like, you're worried about complicating things, but basically just don't. If you feel something, if it's in your heart, then just go for it. I'm like, oh, that's nice. He's got a crush. Good luck, man. Good luck. Go get her. Y'all see where this is going, right? So later that night on the dance floor, guess who ends up dancing with me? And surprise kissing happened. I ran away. Thankfully, he had the sense to follow. And we spent the rest of the weekend together just talking. And we, kind of grew a long distance relationship from there. And, things led to things. And yeah. that's how I met my husband.
That's epic. No, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. It's just, yeah, that is very magical. That's just, yeah, I dig that. I love those moments of just like, yes, yeah, it's epic.
Yeah. And the cool thing was, you know, I had written everything down in my book, and after we'd been dating for a few months, I was kind of just like, huh, I wonder if this is, you know, the person that I asked for when I did that spell. Well, let's check. Let's see how things are going. And I flip through and I start reading down the list, and my eyes just start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I go, oh my gosh, he's ticking an awful lot of these boxes. Oh dear, I did a thing. So, you know, then of course the inner struggle of, oh my gosh, you know, I hope I'm not like messing with somebody's free will or whatever. But it was like, no, I didn't ask for him specifically. I said someone who has these criteria. It's not my fault if he has all these criteria. So I took the book with me the next time I went to visit him, and was just like, you know, just in the interest of honesty, I did do a love spell, and I think it brought me you. Have a look at this. And he's reading down and just kind of doing the same expression. It's like, wow, yeah, you were specific. I'm like, yeah. But yeah, and it all checked out. And I'm like, so you're not freaked out by that at all? You know, that doesn't bother you? He's like, oh no, my mom's a witch. I'm like, his mom doesn't actually like self-identify as a witch, but the way she lives, you know, she kind of is like, she says earth-centered spirituality, and I'm like, oh honey, you're a pagan. But it's what she's comfortable calling herself.
Yeah.
But it's like, sweetie, you have a bonfire every solstice. There's an altar in your living room. It's just it's funny as hell. So my mother-in-law and I get along very, very well.
That's epic. Yeah, that's epic. Yeah, I'm very lucky with my mother-in-law is very yeah, she's quite good with the whole sort of energy sensing and things and crystals, all this sort of stuff. She's very much sort of someone who is in tune with things in a sort of freaky way. We were driving down the road once, and we went sort of to pick up people, and then she got into the car and we had the radio off, but before then we'd had these really classic old tunes, and she just started humming the tune we had previously played in the car.
Oh no.
And we were like, and she's like, I don't know where that's come from, I haven't heard that song in years. And I'm like, you're a witch. But no, that was just, yeah, I love those like moments in terms of like those magical moments, and you know, and just sort of the irony. I've had a lot of irony, I think, when I've been like, am I doing this right? Because I was walking down the street one time, and in a sort of witchy Facebook group, we did a group spell, and it was a prosperity one, and I thought, you know what, I'm feeling pretty good right now, I'll do it to boost everybody else, and you know, if I get something from it, then happy days. Do you know what I mean? So I do this thing. I'm walking along the street and I find 50p, I find 20p, I find this, that, and the other. And then I found like a pound or something. And I was like, and I was there, and I'm like, okay. And then I found another like 50p or something. And I said to myself, look, 50p's are great, but I could really do with a fiver or something. And I walked up the road, and this is just one of those moments where I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I was walking up the road, and there was this pile of leaves that was been brushed towards the side where the road met the pavement, and sticking upright, right, not like this, not tucked away, sticking upright, waggling at me, was a £5 note. And I was like, God. I was like, come on. I was like, you really, like, you're kidding me? And ever since then I've been like, yeah, all right, thank you, universe, like I'm gonna go with it. Like, that's cool. Yeah,
I love it when the universe is like, oh, you wanted to be cheeky, but we got you.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, okay, I'll shut up now. Yeah. Oh man, yeah, it's just, yeah, that was just one of those moments. And yeah, it's super fun when you get those, and I just love the whole kind of the crafting of something, and putting things together, and then getting some kind of result in sort of unexpected ways as well. And it just, yeah, I think it's so fun, and that's kind of half of this. It's like it's half the surprise. I think it's like I'm planning it to go this way, but maybe it'll go this way. We'll find out. Do you know what I mean? So yeah,
how does the song go? You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that. When putting together spells, you know, you were saying in the book, which we were saying about fancy ingredients not really sort of making or breaking it.
Yeah,
I definitely found that myself. You mentioned like clear intent being really key, and that's sort of the main thing. How do you go about getting that clear intent? What's the process there?
Generally, it's just sort of stopping for a minute and thinking about, okay, what do I want this spell to do, and how do I want it to do it? It's not just, okay, well, how do I want my home to be protected? Great. How? Do you want, what do you mean by protected? Do you want it to be hard to find? Do you just want to be protected from illness? Do you want to be protected from accidents? Do you want to be protected from intruders? Be specific, close those loopholes. And then obviously you back everything up with practical mundane action. But it's really just sort of a matter of getting a clear idea in my head when I sit down to do something of what I want and how I want it to work. It took some practice, because at first it was just like, oh, okay, I would like to get a job. Okay, do you want a better job than you have now, or just any job? It's like, oh shoot, okay, loopholes. Yeah. So, and I have found that the clearer I can make my my intentions as I'm putting a spell together, the easier it is to focus in on that once I'm doing the casting, and the easier it is to apply my willpower to it to, that's what makes things work. It's about knowing what you want, being clear about it, and not being afraid to go this, not this, this.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Do you find I see a lot of things saying about when you're writing spells, writing it as if it's already happened, or not saying what you don't want to happen. Do you feel there's a space to go, not this in a spell and then this? Or do you feel like you always should be speaking in the sort of what you want rather than what you don't want? Because I find that sometimes if you're seeking to move away from something or to get rid of something, how do you not mention the thing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I like you said, I think it really depends on what you're doing. It depends on what kind of spell it is, what you want it to do, how you want it to work, and whether you're trying to attract something or banish something, or if you're more focused on stasis. Are you focused on keeping things, good the way they are? Because we do talk a lot about, oh, I want to bring this thing to me, or I want to keep this thing away from me. But there are spells that just focus on things are good now, let's keep them that way. So yeah, I do think there is room in the discussion for many ways of setting your intent in regards to, saying I will have this thing, or this is what will happen, versus speaking as if it's already happened, and sort of manifesting it as a present truth in a way, versus saying I am done with this thing, I don't want this anymore, I want this, not this. I don't want this, I want something new. And sometimes when you're setting your intent, there's no way to address what you want except by saying what you don't want. There's not really a way to say, I would like to get away from this situation without saying, I don't want this situation anymore.
No, I totally do that. Yeah, that's so cool. I think that's just sort of a level-headed thing. I think sometimes you need to sort of get back to the kind of practicality of actually putting these things together, and yeah. Do you think there's ever a time perhaps that you shouldn't cast a spell? Is there ever a time when you think, actually, no, this isn't the right thing to do right now?
Well, again, it's all very situational, and that more than anything, I think, would depend on the person. As much as I advocate for, it is everyone's choice whether or not they're going to use baneful magic. And I do believe that it is everyone's choice, and they should also have the freedom to use it poorly and mess up and learn from that mistake, because that's really important. There are times when it's like, okay, think about what you're doing and think if maybe there's not another way around this. And not just with hexing, but with any spell. It's like, okay, do you really need to apply a magical solution to this? Is this something that, if left alone, will resolve itself? Or is this something where you really, really, really need to focus on mundane solutions over magical ones? Sure, you can use magic later if what you're doing now isn't helping, but at some point, just to have that knee-jerk reaction of, I need to do a spell for this. It's like, no, sit down for a second and think about the situation. What else do you need to be doing to get what you want or resolve the situation? Just sort of in that situation where your first instinct is, I can resolve this with magic. There's probably something else too, and you need to know what that is before you do the magic, because unless you back up your magic with some kind of mundane action, it's probably not going to work very well.
Yeah, totally. I always say, like, do the mundane thing and then do the magical thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the way.
Exactly. All the protection magic in the world is not going to help you if you don't lock your damn doors.
Yeah, most definitely. It's like,
yeah.
I totally think that. I saw a post someone shared about, these candles I burnt left a terrible mark on my table, and is this a bad omen? And it's like, it's an omen. You should have used something under the candle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your emphasis on practical fire prevention.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, when I was writing the book, I had literally just heard, when I was writing that article, about, some fluffhead who had been out in the woods doing a ritual and just left their candles to burn down and started a small brush fire. And it was like, goodness, what did you think was going to happen? Yeah. Rule number 1, fire burns. Rule number 2, things that touch fire also burn. You left a burning candle, an open flame, in the middle of 26 cubic miles of kindling. Really? Just oy. But yeah, and there's so much with other witchy books that talks about, you can use this herb, you can use fire, you can use this, you can use that. And it's also like, are you going to talk about how to use it safely, or no? Okay, I'm in. Tag me.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I'm picturing like a witchy wrestling ring where you're just sort of jumping in,
leaning over the ropes. Whoa. I'm a big fan of wrestling, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Every week, man.
I feel like that's a good thing.
Yeah, like I had just gotten, and I still get so many questions from witches who are like, how do I do, a candle spell or a burning bowl, or something like this fire spell? How do I do it, in my home? And I'm like, well, first of all, don't do it indoors. Stop that. Go outside. My home fills up with smoke every time I do a fire spell. Why are you doing it inside? Why? Open a window, please. And just seeing all these altars and everything with these lovely, beautiful bunches of dried flowers and altar cloths and everything. And I'm sitting there going, so many fire hazards. Please stop. And just, like, aesthetic is wonderful, and it's you know, it's a really fun part of the craft, and it's very important to a lot of people, but it's also like, please, please, please be safe. You know, I don't want you to lose your health or your home or your assets or, you know, something that you hold dear to you, you know, because you know, did something silly with a candle for the sake of aesthetic. I mean, please just, please practice safely.
Yeah.
I'm begging you.
Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah, I always think the best way to incorporate water into your practice as an element is to throw it over anything you've burnt. Generally. Like, there you go. I've incorporated
that'll work.
Yeah, quite thoroughly. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
I totally dig that. I tell you what, I do like ash though as a sort of post ingredient. I tend to find that when I do spells, there are certain things that I have from like the remnants. Like I did a spell that went particularly it was quite particularly lucky, so then I used the wax that was left over as wax of luck and added little pinches of it into things. I thought that was like a, you know, a way of doing it. And with ash as well, I had a particularly successful spell on that one, so I used the ash of that as ash of success to just sort of give a little boost here and there, you know, things like that, which I think is really good. And I love that sort of getting yourselves down and dirty with spell ingredients. And in Besom, Stang and Sword, the book on sort of a very traditional practice individually, there's a quote that I love, which is, witchcraft is secular and filthy. And
Yes.
I think, like, do you agree with that? Do you think that's a good take, or would you say something slightly different? What do you think?
I absolutely agree. Witchcraft is a craft. I believe that witchcraft at its core is secular, and it is filthy. My good friend Trey Dorn of the BS3
Yes.
Witchcraft podcast likes to say, you know, dirt under my nails and a brick in my hand, and that's how they view their craft. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. You know, it's down and dirty. It's not always pretty. Sometimes it's rough, and sometimes it's downright ugly, but it gets the job done. And you know, if you're going to be a witch, you cannot be afraid to get your hands dirty, because you're gonna, whether it's with, you know, literal mud, or, you know, spell ingredients, or ashes and soot, or just whatever mess you've made. You know, it's not something that's going to be neat and clean and, you know, easily containable all the time. It's kind of like finger painting in a way. It's like, sure, you can kind of, you know, oh, I'll put this color there and this color there, and you can, you know, separate them out onto different fingers and kind of keep everything as neat as possible for a while, but eventually it's just going to turn into a big, you know, you're going to end up with it everywhere, and there's no getting around it. But the more that you get into it and the more enthusiastic that you get with the color smooshing and the smearing and the really kind of, you know, getting up to your elbows in it, the more fun it is, and the better it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I very much do. That's what you say about the finger painting side of things, because I do the odd sort of magical painting quite badly, but I've learned to just do it. And sometimes I think I could use a paintbrush, but I could also use a palette knife on my fingers. Like, I might just go for this, and that's actually been the more, I think, energetically rich result. The result has been more energetically rich because I've had that kind of energy into it, and that's definitely been something I dig. I noticed, like, in your book, like, there's a lot of things that you make. There's physical kind of outcomes from these spells that you put somewhere, or are a result of your, you know, your crafting. How important do you think it is to have a physical outcome of a spell in terms of something that is there?
Well, my old standby, you know, it really depends on the spell. It depends on the person. I know a few witches who work purely with energy, you know, either because they just don't have materials or they're not comfortable with them. You know, I do plenty of spells where, you know, I just light a candle and say a thing, and that's it. But it is a lot of fun, and it's very satisfying to have a physical manifestation, like a little thing for your spell, whether you've made a poppet or a jar or a web or a piece of jewelry, you know, something that you can look at and be like, yeah, that's magical and I made it. It's very satisfying, And it's very fun to be able to just kind of look around your home and your environment and be like surrounded by your craft in a very physical way, not just with books, not just with tools, but with actual things you have brought into existence with your skill and your magic that then are there, and they represent these things you've done. They represent that power and they represent those accomplishments. So that to a degree, I think everyone should have some kind of experience where they've made some sort of magical item, just so they, can have something that they can point to and be like, yeah, I did that. And it's a nice little sort of physical reminder of things that you've done. Because it's lovely to be like, well, I've done all these things and I've experienced all these things. I've written all these articles. But it's certainly much more satisfying to be like, I made a book.
I totally did that. I think that, yeah. I love the sort of, the making aspect. There's almost like a ritual in the making in a way, in terms of, so there's certain tools that I use a lot. Do you have, and I asked this question in a group recently, what 5 tools would you say are like your top 5 tools for witching? But they can't include, this is my little caveat, they can't include, I know, sorry, I've got a caveat. They can't include incense, they can't include crystals or divination tools.
I'm still good.
Good. Good.
Are we talking components or just like actual like tools of making?
It could be tools of, let's go tools of making. I think tools of making is
okay.
good. Yeah.
I'm gonna go jars. Give that witch a jar. Witches love jars. Yeah, I use jars for tons and tons of stuff. Candles, absolutely. I love including candles and wax in my various spells. My little cauldron. I have just one of those little like 3-inch deep cauldrons with the little legs and the lid, and I love using that thing. That's super, super helpful. Is that 3? 4 is definitely my ritual knife. My husband made it for me.
Oh, wow.
Made.
Wow,
he got the components, and he talked to a family friend who is a smith, and he made a knife.
Wow, that's epic.
Yeah, like it's named and everything. It is a proper knife.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so it's my ritual knife, it's my warding knife. Every time I do the household protection spells, every time I set those wards, that knife is with me. And when it's not being used, it lives on the first shelf right under my altar. I'm not sure if books count as tools of making.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think technically yes.
Kind of, because it's knowledge.
Yeah.
But I would have to say, in that case, if we're not counting just tools of knowledge, I would probably say it's a tie between like fiber art stuff, and plant pots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I love my garden. I love doing growth magic there. I love attaching, the growth and harmony and health and, prosperity spells to my various plants. And I love singing them up from the dirt and taking care of them. And I love doing any sort of spell that I can incorporate into some kind of weaving, whether it's the web things, which is just a lovely meditation exercise, or some kind of sewing, or I crochet, and that's, sit there making granny squares for luck. It's great. So probably all of those.
Oh, nice. What about components then? What would be your top 5 components?
Plants, and plants. Plants would probably be like the top 3 spots.
Yeah.
Candles, like I said, they become components as well as tools. Goodness, let's see. Stones, not necessarily so much crystals sometimes, as just like a rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use a lot of string in my magic. I use a fair amount of knot work, especially if I'm binding something or someone. Not saying I've done it a million times from 2016 to 2020, just saying maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a lot of knotted cords buried under those rose bushes, but you'll never know.
Talking to myself.
And besides those, just sort of, I really, really love doing witchcraft with like whatever I have to hand. I like the challenge of, oh, okay, you know, I want to do a spell. Let's see how much I can do with what's in my pockets or what's in my purse or what's on my desk. You know, I want to do something right now. I've got a Post-it and a push pin. We're making this happen.
Yeah, I think that really reminds me of Alex Rec and you know,
I love Alex so much. They're awesome.
Yes. Oh, honestly, just awesome. I love their you know, Dabblers Week in DIY Witchery zine, and just there's their concepts on things. That's a witch who's just wonderful to talk to and kind of mine their brain. And it's so funny, we were talking about sort of making stuff with, you know, just stuff that you find, and I was saying about using a nut and bolt that I found in the street, some, you know, work or whatever it was had been done and there were leftovers on the ground. And so I thought, well, actually I could make this into something that's an attraction spell, because I can tighten it so that it comes towards it, or I could loosen it to remove something, or I could, you know, like I was saying, what can I do with this sort of nut and bolt, which theoretically is like the least magical thing you could find. But like, I think that's that exploration of stuff is so fun, especially once you get past that I must use this thing in this spell, and then you go, I can use anything, and like I can just do what I like in a way, and mindfully, and it's fun to sort of have that kind of that concept, and just I love that. And in terms of, you said about plants, definitely digging the plants. What, you know, a lot of people say rosemary is their go-to plant, and I do dig a bit of rosemary, but is there one plant that you would say is your like your one that's been something that you've used over the years that's been particularly reliable in your practice, or that you just have a particular affection for? Like I've found cinquefoil being like, five-finger grass being something that I didn't expect to like really get attachment to, but that's sort of my one. Is there one that you particularly dig?
Basil.
Oh,
yep. Sweet basil. I always have to have a jar of it. I always have to have it growing in my garden. There's an old adage that says, where basil grows, no evil goes. Or basil, I should say. Must pronounce things properly.
Thank you.
Where basil grows, no evil goes. Terrible, I apologize.
No, that was excellent. I must say, that was on point.
That one's my favorite, sort of like mundane, everyday, can find it anywhere kind of herb. You know, if I'm going to put something together, it's like, oh, you know, basil has 1,001 uses. Let's try that. Angelica Root is another one of my go-tos, especially if I'm doing any kind of protection, any kind of warding. It's okay. Angelica Root, and what else? White willow bark. I have sort of an affinity to willow trees and oak trees as well, so oak bark. Rosemary is on there. I love the smell of it. I love the look of it. I always have to try and have it in my garden, just because it's a very happy, kind of reassuring little plant for me, and I've never really understood why, but I love having it around. And the other one I gotta say is peppers.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about chili peppers. I'm not really like a big fan of spicy food. You know, I'm not one of those people who like test themselves on hot sauce to see how much they can have before their face melts. You know, that's really more my husband's domain. But there is something to me that has always been very satisfying about growing chili pepper plants. So not sure what all that is about. Maybe it's because they're easy. They're real simple to grow in pots, and very satisfying when they bloom and then they fruit, and you just have these cute little, you know, brightly colored fruits, and you can go, ah, yes, I grew that. And, you know, then if you happen to pop them away for magic. You can use them to speed something up, or strengthen and empower whatever working you're doing. Or if you're feeling spicy, you can really mess up someone's day.
Yeah, oh, honestly, I do. You know what, chili, I underestimated that as a spell ingredient, but I did a spell on the Aries new moon, and I thought, oh, I need a bit of red in there, a bit of Aries, go for it, because Aries sun, Aries moon, it was at the same time. I'm an Aries, and I was like, let's chuck in some chili in there, and I whizzed it up, and my goodness, that spell was just like, oh, it had some geez Louise, I was like,
Yeah,
it came
it packs a punch.
what? Yeah, that was crazy. I was like, okay, I dig that plant. Yeah, totally dig that. I love the sort of sense of, like you say, about the growth of things, and having that sort of concept of time and seasons and all that kind of thing. I think we kind of have that in our own practices and our own sort of lives and things like that. So you have those sort of seasons as witches where you kind of have that spring of sort of going, bursting into some particular thing you want to get into, and then you have the sort of summer of really getting that focus there, maybe the kind of autumn of bringing it in a bit, harvesting things in, and then the sort of winter of kind of absorbing the information that you've kind of got from that burst of energy in the first sort of part of your kind of witchy year, whether that's literal or mental side of things. Is there anything that you feel like you've been kind of like wintering at the moment that you want to bring into spring? What do you think? Are there any things that you're sort of thinking, hey, I need to give a little bit of oomph to this? Or is there something that you're working on that you want to bring out into the world?
So many things.
Oh,
I am nurturing many things in my garden right now. Not least of which is a couple of new book projects that I've been working on for ages. I know I've been promising the Sisters Grimoire Volume 2 for years now, and it's gonna happen. It is gonna happen. It's just a matter of me, being able to find the time between the podcast and the daily life. And I have that ADHD brain where it's like, yeah, this thing I've been working on forever was fun, but ooh, shiny new project.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's more stuff that I want to do with the podcast. There's more content I want to create. I want to, make video tutorials and put them on YouTube.
Nice.
I want to do actually kind of more like what you do. I actually want to like interface with people with a face,
Yeah.
and like talk to people.
Yeah.
It's just, again, it's a matter of like finding the time and finding the spoons and the quiet to be able to do it. But mostly it's writing projects right now. I have a lot of stuff that's been backburnered for a while, and I'm really hoping to be able to bring some of those to the fore and maybe finish something for a change sometime this year or next year. We'll see.
Oh yeah, that's epic. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the whole concentration thing, it's such a challenge. I feel like I need to do a concentration spell. I feel like I need to do something that can boost that, because oh goodness, yeah, it's a toughie. For anyone who's sort of seeking to write their practice down, or who wants to write anything, would you have any advice for them?
Oh yeah. If you want to quantify your practice, if you want to write something, do not worry about your first draft. Just write. Just write. And if you have something in mind, don't trust yourself to remember it, write it down. If you think something witty, if you say something cool, if you think of something that's like, okay, that's really neat, don't trust yourself to remember it 15 minutes from now, or half an hour from now, or at lunchtime, or after work, or after this gathering. Put it down on a post-it, on a napkin, make yourself a recording on your phone, put it down in your notes, something. Make sure you record it, because I've had way too many instances of being like, oh, I had this really great thought and it's gone. So yeah, and we put so much emphasis on, maybe not so much emphasis, maybe that's not the right word. Maybe we have so much concern about things looking right or sounding right the first time we do them with writing. And it's like, no, don't worry about your first draft. No one has to see this but you. It's more important to get the ideas down, to get them written out, or even at least to make an outline. Even if you have to go back in and fill things in later, even if you have to do things out of order, because sometimes you can't do things in a linear fashion, that's fine, as long as you record the information and as long as you start, because that's the really hard part, is starting and then continuing on. One of the quotes that I kind of have tacked to my wall, it's in my office, so I can't like look at it and quote it, but there was something I heard Neil Gaiman say on a podcast some time ago. The people who are going to succeed as writers are the people who put in the time and the effort, the people who put butts in chairs and actually sit there and do the work, something to that effect. And that's something that I've taken very much to heart. It's like, yeah, I can sit here and talk a good game. I can sit here and say, oh, I'm going to write a book. Oh, I've got all these ideas. But unless I actually sit down and do it, it's not worth very much.
Yeah.
So you do have to put in the effort, and, just don't be afraid to mess it up the first time. There's always editing. Just get something written down.
I did that. On the sort of other side of things, are there, you mentioned Cunningham's work earlier, are there any books that you would say are your kind of must reads for witches? What would be your real sort of go-tos?
Oh boy, I as every book I've ever read just goes straight out of my brain.
It's such a toughie, isn't it? And I think there's so sort of some of them are so like niche on a particular subject. Someone can be broader. It's a toughie to narrow things down sometimes.
Ooh, yeah. Can you see the buffering wheel on my forehead? There's a little spinning hourglass there. Well, actually, Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Plants is one of them. Yes, I know it was written in the 80s. It's kind of outdated at this point, but that's not his fault. I'm sure that if he had lived longer, he would have updated it, or done something more modernized at some point. But it is what it is. It was a foundational text for me, and I think that it's something that's very easy to reference, just sort of as a jumping off point to give people an idea of how plant magic works and what the correspondences are. And you got to start somewhere, and that's a pretty good place to start, because it mostly talks about plants. It doesn't really talk about rhetoric that much. Little bit, but not enough that it overpowers the, hey, here's what plants do. Oh my goodness, let's see what else.
On this one. And the thing is, when you love books, it's so hard when someone asks you to like narrow it down to anything in particular, or when you're like as widely read as you are. Yeah, it's the thing of like, hang on a minute, I read this thing in a thing somewhere, and that was then.
Yeah.
And this is now, and what?
Well, mostly I like in my head I go to, well, I've read these authors who are really good. What the heck were the titles?
Yeah. Any authors are good.
Oh yeah, Ellen Dugan has a number of books out: Practical Protection Magic, Cottage Witchery, Garden Witchery. Those were really helpful when I was starting out. Kate West has a few that are good. She had those Real Witch books. Yeah. Real Witch's Garden, Real Witch's Kitchen, Real Witch's Book of Spells and Rituals, I think it is. It's a big blue book. But not that big blue book. I actually am not a huge fan of Uncle Bucky's Big Blue Book. Just because, it was very, sort of Wicca, mystery, religion centered, and I'm like, no, this doesn't resonate with me. So thank you, but no thank you. Not
Yeah.
Can't say that's one I'd recommend personally.
Mm.
On the more modern side of things, Lisa Marie Basile, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's spelled like basil with an E.
Yeah.
She's written something called Light Magic for Dark Times, and I enjoyed that one immensely.
Oh, epic.
She's a very cool perspective on modern magic and using magic, you know, in times that are tumultuous and less than fun. You know, like what we happen to be living through right now.
Yeah, yeah. We're clinging
So
on.
that's a very interesting read. Erin Murphy Hiscock has a few real good titles out. I'm blanking on the name. Anna Franklin. Anna Franklin has a Hearth Witch compendium out that's like, it's a nice big weighty book that's all about like plant magic and botanicals and kitchen magic, and just ooh, it makes my heart so happy. And I will forever and always adore Dorothy Morrison's Utterly Wicked. That was my actual introduction to baneful magic. Like that's what I based my first round of learning on, when I was like, all right, I'm done with being one of those witches that's like, oh, but the threefold law, but never ever do this. And then somebody was like, but that only applies to Wiccans if they want to follow the threefold law. And I was like, huh.
Yeah.
And then I got really mad at somebody, and it was like, all right, it's time to learn a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, all right, you know what? If I'm going to have the urge to actually do this, let me make sure that I'm like doing the thing properly. And Utterly Wicked is the name of the book, and it's just awesome.
Yeah, to be fair, it's got to be with that sort of title. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm really dig that.
I think the last one I would say is Anne Mora's Grimoire for the Green Witch. You're going to need to go through it with some index tabs, but it has a lot of correspondence tables, just a lot of things that you wouldn't usually think to look for. A lot of very sort of niche esoteric information. It has rituals in there. It is sort of like from a traditional standpoint, but it's a lot of information that you can then kind of use as you see fit, and you can keep what resonates with you and keep what, you know, works for you, and kind of put the rest aside. But I find that one very useful.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Are there any sort of primary texts you would say are worth looking at? You know, for me, I consider that term particularly to be things like 3 books of occult philosophy, Eliphas Levi, you know, that kind of thing. Are there any of those that you feel are kind of essential reading, or do you not really need those necessarily?
I'm not sure I would call them essential reading, at least not from my point of view. If you are interested in the history of witchcraft, if you are interested in kind of figuring out where our modern beliefs about it came from, then yeah, you know, maybe explore some older texts. But by and large, most of the useful information that's come from that has been reprinted, you know, somewhere in some form in, you know, a more modern title, probably with much more modern viewpoints, which is, you know, what we need. I will say that, you know, just purely to understand like where things have come from, or if you want to get really good and mad, you should read King James's Demonology. Have a go at reading Kramer's Malleus Maleficarum if you really want to get mad. Mather's Wonders of the Invisible World is actually very interesting. It just casts sort of casts some light on like what the beliefs and superstitions were at the time of you know, people saying, you know, this is what we believe that, you know, spirits and you know, fairies and witches and things are up to in the modern day, modern for them anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like I'm immediately more knowledgeable just from all those suggestions. Really, I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
it's juicy.
there's a lot out there where, you know, people were just kind of compiling the the superstitions and the beliefs of the day, like with, you know, Reginald Scott's discovery of witches. You know, it's not so much them saying I have discovered witches. It's going, hey, you know, here's what I've observed,
Mm,
and those observations are invaluable because they are kind of a slice of life from the time. And, you know, all the historical research in the world isn't really, you know, going to help if you don't have these firsthand accounts, you know, colored by personal preference and, you know, temporal prejudices as they may be. You know, they're still very important.
yeah, I think that. Yeah, that's so cool. I think that perspective is cool. And I'm loving sort of the, you know, the witch books that are coming out recently. There's been some really sort of thought-provoking ones, and ones that have got kind of more into the nitty-gritty. And I think I'm excited to see witchcraft in 10, 20 years time, and having those books as the ones that are the recommended, because I feel like some people like stop their reading in the 90s and then just forever go like to those books. I'm like, but there's been so many good ones since then. Like, come on, it drives me absolutely crazy. Oh yeah, but no, I'm excited to sort of see the future of witchcraft and how that pans out. What do you think it could be, you know, in terms of, you know, where we are now? What is the future of witchcraft, or what are your hopes for the future of witchcraft?
Well, I hope that we continue to be more inclusive in our community. I hope that we continue to value discussion and research and critical thinking, because these things are very, very important. And I hope that what we do continues to become more socially acceptable. Um, you know, we're on an upward trend with that, and you know, it almost feels like maybe we might come out of the satanic panic sometime soon. You know, it stalled there for a bit and then came back around like they do. Um, but it's still an upward trend, and I'm just hoping the pendulum doesn't swing back the other way. Uh, of yes, it's now more socially acceptable for people to be like, yes, I'm a witch. You know, back when I started, I couldn't have dreamed of living my life as openly as I do, where my friends, my family, my job knows that I'm a pagan and a witch, and nobody gives me, well, no, I shouldn't say nobody. Not too many people give me crap for it. The ones who know. Uh, yeah, I mean, there's the odd bit of ribbing, but it's just, you know, I never could have dreamed when I started that I could have a life where I am living in the open. And I would love to see that trend continue so that, you know, people don't feel like they have to hide who they are, that they can be proud of being witches, and that they, you know, can be safe in their homes, because I know there's still a lot of beginners that are like, okay, how do I do this without my parents or my housemates or whatever, you know, finding out, because if they do, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. And, you know, just I'm really hoping that eventually we get to a point where it's like, oh, you've taken up witchcraft is the same as, oh, you've decided to start playing baseball,
Yeah,
or, you know, painting portraits or gardening. It's just it's something that is accepted as an interest.
yeah, I did that. I love that. I really loved your episode on covert sort of witching, if you like, and I thought that was just yes, stealth witching was just such a fun term. I'm just like, yes, yeah, that is epic. It was probably one of the most comprehensive, reassuring, and just plain sensible bits of advice for any witches, but you know, especially witches who are, you know, in the broom closet, so to speak. And I appreciated you addressing the whole broom closet terminology, and how not everyone might dig that term, but how there's a place for it, and there are, you know, comparisons that can be made. And I thought that was really interesting, and kind of helped me to wrap my head around that term and its sort of usage, which was really cool. I dig that. In terms of sort of the future, obviously now we're coming up to the solstice soon. Do you have any plans for that? Are you digging sort of that? Are you a seasonal kind of celebrator, or are you more like, oh my God, it's the solstice?
Well, half the time I only remember holidays by marking the day after they happen.
Yeah.
I'm terrible that way. Midsummer is not really one of the ones that I go for, purely because, like I said, I'm not really a hot weather kind of person. But once we get into autumn, once we get to the autumn solstice, especially once we get on toward October and Samhain, oh yeah. Then I am a seasonal witch, and for those 3 months, just from September all the way through to the end of November, I am just, ears deep in my craft. I'm doing something every week, and just kind of really reveling in it. It is the season of the witch for me. And it's like, okay, this is the time when I'm really going to celebrate what I am and what I do and what we all do and what it means to all of us, and just really, really be happy about it, and try new things and do new things and really go hard with the rituals, where I don't really do too many the rest of the year, but around Samhain, it's like, okay, we have the house warding, we have the apples for the dead, we have the altar lighting with the 4 shots of whiskey, and these are things that must happen.
Yeah, I think that. Do you notice the patterns in the year, or any kind of months in the year particularly, that you've found that you've done particularly certain types of like spell work or craft? Do you feel there's been any sort of months where you go, hey, I did this last year as well, like, or oh, I did this, is there anything like that you've noticed are particularly powerful times for you? Or do you feel there's a waxing and waning to your craft?
To a point, yes. During the spring and the fall, I actually feel stronger. I think it's because they're seasons of change, and because I see witchcraft as, using intention and focused will to make a change. Maybe that's why it resonates more strongly with me. Maybe it's just because those are my favorite times of year as far as weather goes. I'm not sure. It's also like the awakening and the dying of the year, and those two things kind of, I don't know. It's the beginning and the end of the harvest cycle, the beginning and the end of the growing cycle is, I don't know. There's something about it that just feels stronger. Things come more easily. I have more energy, that sort of thing. And I do mark certain occasions where it's like, oh, okay, it's March, so it's time to plant the garden and do the growth magic. It's November, it's time to do all the remembrance stuff, that sort of thing.
Oh, I like that, yeah. And so that's sort of celebrating the seasons. Are there any witches or practitioners that you want to celebrate or give a shout out to?
Well, I have to give a shout out to my buddy Trey Dorn from BS Free. It is thanks to them that I have a home for my podcast. And they're also just super fun to like bounce ideas off of. We mentioned Alex Reck. Alex is a fabulous person. We've had a decent working relationship for many years now, between them carrying my books at Portland Button Works, and me getting buttons from the Button Works for my table, and just being able to kind of vibe through Tumblr and bounce ideas off each other. When I finally came around to the idea of being a secular witch, that was who I went to be like, all right, how do we do this? And Alex is a person that keeps me honest. It's like when I start kind of going off on tangents and stuff, Alex is kind of going, hey, you're talking about a thing that is near and dear to my heart. Do we maybe want to quantify that a little better? So, and again, just things going right out of my head. Kai from Witchcraft for the Restless has been a friend and mutual of mine for many years now, and she's just a lovely, lovely person. Goodness gracious. There are other people I'm forgetting. Pretty much if you follow me on Tumblr and you've interacted with me there, I love you. You're wonderful. If you've brought my books, thank you for, putting bread on my table. If you've listened to my show, if you've left a review, mwah, you're lovely people. And I do have to give a quick little shout out to my girl Jenna up in Pennsylvania still, because she has been my witchy sister from day one. We came up together. I haven't seen her in forever, but I love and miss her very much. And it's just been cool kind of having someone with me on the ride.
And what about yourself? Like, where are your hangouts? Where should people find you?
All over the internet, really. You can of course find me on Amazon, my Amazon author page. Just look up Bree NicGarran and you can find all my books. You can find me on Tumblr at Bree Landwalker. You can find me on WordPress at breenicgarran.wordpress.com. That's also where my shop is. It's closed right now because I'm gearing up for an event, but in mid-June 2021, it will be open again. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, under the name at Bree NicGarran. Basically, if you look up my name, you can find me all over the internet. Give me a follow, give me DMs, say hi, and definitely check out the Hex Positive podcast if you like what you've heard here, because there's lots more of that there. And I've got a new episode coming out very soon that I'm very excited about.
That's lush. Yeah, I love it. I love the podcast. It's so good to hear your voice from reading your books and everything, and speaking with you today. And yeah, Alex, obviously big fan of Alex. Trey, I love BS3 Witchcraft, and I've really appreciated the kind of the frankness and the sort of the snark that is there, which is just so fun. And yeah, I really love yeah, just it's such an exciting time to be a secular witch, or to be a witch who is in that kind of sphere. And especially exciting to know that you're looking at all these new things that are coming up in terms of your books and in terms of YouTube. I think that is so important. You fill such an important space in witchcraft, and you're someone who has really helped me be a witch over the years. And it's that's not something that I'm doing to blow smoke anywhere. It's that I genuinely appreciate your work, and you being there enables witches to be themselves. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming on Doing the Magical Thing. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you again for for all your support and for everything that you're doing for the community, because what you're doing is very important too.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.